Wang Yibo's life is full of moments people celebrate. The performances, the awards, the legendary dances, the characters he portrayed, the achievements that built his career. But there is a part of his journey that stays almost invisible, hidden behind the spotlight, behind the schedules, behind the expectations. It is a story that didn't happen on stage or in front of cameras. It happened during a challenge no one saw coming, a moment when he had to choose between staying who he was or becoming who he needed to be. It began during a period of rapid change. His name was everywhere. His projects were rising. His talent was being recognized in ways even he hadn't predicted. Brands wanted him. Directors wanted him. Fans followed him across continents. But the pressure of rising too quickly can feel like running with weights around your ankles. The world sees the glory. Only the person feels the gravity. Yibo was juggling acting scripts, dance rehearsals, new responsibilities, and unexpected opportunities. People often think the hardest part of being a public figure is the workload. But the truth is, the hardest part is the mental space required to stay grounded. You don't just work. You carry the expectations of millions. You carry the fear of disappointing people. You carry the pressure of being perfect at everything you try. For someone who has always demanded excellence from himself, this pressure grew heavier than it appeared. During this period, he was assigned a new project, something slightly different from what he was used to. It wasn't the biggest role of his life. It wasn't the most glamorous. But it required a type of emotional depth that felt unfamiliar. He wasn't afraid of difficulty. Difficult was normal. But this was different. This role required him to tap into a version of himself he didn't show publicly. Vulnerability. He accepted the challenge anyway because that's who he is. He doesn't wait for comfort. He seeks growth, even when it scares him. The first table read happened in a bright room with long windows and tense silence. The other actors took their seats. The director entered with a calm, observant presence. The script sat in front of him thick and demanding. Yibo opened it, scanning the dialogue, feeling the weight of the emotional scenes ahead. When the reading began, something felt off. His voice was steady, but the emotion didn't land. The words were coming out, but they didn't carry the truth the director wanted. The director noticed it immediately. He didn't criticize him. He simply watched. That type of quiet observation can sometimes weigh heavier than words. After the session ended, Yibo felt uneasy. Not embarrassed. Not defeated. Just unsettled. He knew he hadn't delivered what the role needed. And for someone who takes his craft seriously, that was enough to linger in his mind long after the others left the room. He stayed behind in the empty rehearsal hall, sitting alone with the script in his hands. The room was silent except for the faint hum of a distant air conditioner. He turned the pages, reading lines again and again, trying to find what he was missing. That was when the director walked back in. He didn't come with advice or criticism. He came with a question. What are you afraid of showing? Yibo looked up confused. Afraid? He wasn't afraid of performance. He wasn't afraid of pressure. He wasn't afraid of failing. Or so he thought. The director sat across from him, calm and patient, the way someone sits when they already understand the truth, but want the person to discover it themselves. This role, the director continued, doesn't need strength. It needs honesty. Sometimes honesty feels like weakness, especially for someone who has trained himself to be strong all the time. Yibo said nothing, but the words hit deeper than expected. The director leaned back and said softly, "You hide your emotions too well, Yibo. That's admirable in life, but it's limiting in art." For the first time, Yibo felt exposed. Not in a bad way, in a revealing way. He realized he had spent years perfecting discipline, control, silence, and strength. But vulnerability? That was a skill he had never allowed himself to practice. After the director left, Yibo stayed alone in the hall for nearly an hour, replaying his words. Vulnerability wasn't his enemy. It was simply unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things can feel like danger even when they aren't. He went home that night in deep thought. His apartment was quiet, the city outside glowing with late-night lights. He placed the script on the table and poured a cup of tea, letting the warmth settle him. As he flipped through the pages, he noticed something he hadn't paid attention to before. The character he was playing wasn't strong because he never broke. He was strong because he broke and continued moving anyway. That was when Yibo realized something important. Vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's a different kind of strength. The next day, he arrived early. The set was still being prepared. Most of the crew wasn't there yet. He sat in the empty room, opened the script, and allowed himself to feel the character instead of analyzing him. For the first time, he let emotions rise without suppressing them. A memory surfaced, a moment from his early career, when he doubted himself deeply but pushed through anyway. Another memory followed, a time when criticism hit him harder than he allowed anyone to see. Another memory, when he felt overwhelmed but didn't say a word. These moments, usually locked away, suddenly became tools instead of burdens. They weren't weaknesses. They were experiences. And experiences are what bring characters to life. When rehearsals began, the change was immediate. His voice carried emotion. His expression softened. His timing improved. The director watched him silently, smiling just a little. The other actors noticed too. But the real turning point happened during one particular scene. It was emotional. Raw. The kind of scene that required him to let his guard down. The kind that demanded honesty, not performance. The camera rolled. He began speaking his lines, but something happened in the middle of the scene. His voice broke, not dramatically, but just enough to reveal something real. The room stiffened. The director leaned forward in his seat. The crew watched closely. Yibo felt something unlock inside him, a layer of emotion he had never shown on camera before. The scene ended in silence. Not because something went wrong, but because something went right. The director stood up slowly and said, "That is the version of you I've been waiting to see." Yibo exhaled, realizing he had just crossed a bridge in his craft, a bridge he didn't even know he needed. A bridge that allowed him to connect to others emotionally instead of just technically. A bridge that would shape the roles he took, the performances he gave, and the way he understood his own artistry. From that point on, everything changed. Fans began noticing a deeper emotional layer in his acting. Directors saw potential for more complex roles. Even his dancing carried a slightly different energy, not louder, not flashier, but more expressive. His presence grew, not because he performed harder, but because he connected deeper. This transformation didn't happen in front of cameras. It happened in an empty rehearsal hall during a quiet conversation about emotions he never allowed himself to show. It happened in the private space between fear and honesty, between control and expression, between who he was and who he could become. People admire Wang Yibo for his professionalism, his discipline, his calm confidence. But they rarely know the truth behind one of his most important breakthroughs, that it came from learning to stop hiding his heart. It came from realizing that vulnerability doesn't make you less. It makes your art more. In the years that followed, this lesson shaped everything he did. It shaped the way he read scripts, the way he prepared for roles, the way he approached emotional scenes, the way he internalized stories, even the way he performed on stage, with subtle shifts, new layers, deeper presence. Fans often say he has a unique ability to communicate without speaking. That is true. But what they don't realize is that this ability strengthened the moment he allowed himself to feel instead of just perform. The moment he learned that silence can be expressive and emotion can be a tool instead of a threat. This quiet turning point in his journey remains one of the least known stories behind his growth. Not because it was hidden, but because it happened away from spotlight, away from interviews, away from cameras. It happened in the space where real growth usually happens, in private, in honesty, in silence. And that is the story of how Wang Yibo discovered a new version of himself. A version defined not just by talent, discipline, and performance, but by the courage to feel.